The guards grabbed her arm so hard she nearly fell. Dust rose as her bare feet scraped the ground, villagers stepping back as if fear itself had pushed them away. Metal clinked. A spear blocked her path. The orphan girl cried out, her voice thin and shaking, but no one spoke for her. The palace gates loomed ahead, tall and unforgiving, swallowing her small body as the guards dragged her forward. "I didn't steal anything," she whispered, though her voice was already breaking. No one listened. Only hours earlier, her morning had begun like every other. She woke before the sun, curled on the cold floor of her hut at the edge of the kingdom. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, sharp and familiar. She washed her face with water from a cracked bowl, tied her worn cloth around her waist, and stepped outside to look for work. Some days she carried baskets. Some days she swept doorsteps. On bad days she earned nothing at all. Kindness was the only thing she owned in abundance. Near the palace gardens, where most people avoided lingering, she spotted him as she often did. The old gardener bent over the soil, his hands trembling as he pulled weeds from the ground. His clothes were torn, his sandals barely holding together. Others passed him without a glance, some laughing, some shaking their heads as if poverty were contagious. She approached quietly and knelt beside him. "I brought you something," she said, pulling a small piece of bread from the cloth tied at her waist. It was half of what she had earned that day. Her stomach protested, but she ignored it. The gardener looked up, surprised. His eyes were sharp despite his age, studying her face as if memorizing it. "You should keep it," he said softly. "You need it more than I do." She shook her head. "I'll find more work." He hesitated, then accepted the bread with both hands. "Thank you," he said, his voice low, almost heavy with something she didn't understand. They sat together in silence, the palace walls towering behind them. She talked about small things, the ache in her feet, the way the nights felt longer when it rained, how she dreamed of sleeping without fear of waking hungry. He listened, never interrupting, asking gentle questions that made her feel seen, as if her words mattered. When she finally stood to leave, he said, "You have a good heart. Protect it." She smiled, unaware that her kindness was being measured in ways she could never imagine. That morning, she never saw the guards approach. She only felt the sudden grip on her arm, the shout that accused her of stealing palace food, the shock that stole the air from her lungs. As she was dragged away, she searched the gardens with wide, desperate eyes. The gardener was gone, and fear, cold and merciless, settled deep inside her chest. They marched her through the village streets, past faces she recognized and many she didn't. Some people whispered. Some looked away. A few watched with dull curiosity, relieved it was not them. The orphan girl tried to keep her head up, but tears blurred her vision. Every step toward the palace felt heavier than the last. "I didn't take anything," she repeated, her voice hoarse now. "Please." A guard scoffed. "You were seen near the gardens every day. Where do you think the food came from?" She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. How could she explain that she had given food, not taken it? That she had shared what little she had with a man poorer than herself? The truth sounded foolish even to her own ears. The palace gates creaked open, and fear rushed in like a storm. Inside, the world changed. Stone floors shone beneath her dirty feet. Tall pillars rose toward a ceiling she could barely see. The guards pushed her forward, and the echo of their footsteps made her feel even smaller. She had never been this close to the heart of power. It smelled of incense and authority, nothing like the dust and sweat she knew. They stopped in a vast hall and forced her to her knees. Her hands trembled as they released her arms. She folded inward, trying to make herself invisible. Her thoughts raced. Punishment. Prison. Worse. She had heard stories of what happened to thieves, especially orphaned ones no one would miss. Time stretched painfully. Then she heard footsteps. Slow. Measured. Confident. She lifted her head just enough to see a figure enter from the far end of the hall. Her breath caught in her throat. The man walking toward her wore fine robes now, deep in color, clean and regal. His posture was straight, his presence commanding. Guards along the walls bowed as he passed. Her heart began to pound. Something about him felt familiar, yet impossibly distant. He stopped a few steps away. Silence filled the hall so completely that she could hear her own breathing. Slowly, he raised his hand and the guard stepped back. "Stand," he said. His voice. Her eyes widened. It was the gardener. The girl rose unsteadily to her feet, disbelief washing over her in waves. Her mind rejected what her eyes were seeing. This could not be the same man who had sat beside her in the dirt, who had eaten dry bread with grateful hands. The man looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to the guards. "You accused this child of theft," he said calmly. "She was seen near the gardens daily, Your Highness," one guard replied quickly. "We assumed." "Assumed," the man repeated, his tone sharpening. The girl's knees weakened. "Your Highness." The words echoed in her head like thunder. The man turned back to her, and for a moment, the stern mask softened. "Tell me," he said, "why did you come to the gardens every day?" Her voice shook as she spoke. "To help him. He was hungry. Just like me." A murmur rippled through the hall. The man inhaled slowly, as if steadying something deep inside himself. Then he spoke again, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "This child gave without knowing who I was." He stepped forward. "And that," he said, "is why she stands innocent before you all. If this story is touching you so far, don't forget to like the video. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts." The hall remained frozen, waiting for what would come next. The prince turned away from her and faced the court. His voice grew firmer, carrying authority that allowed no argument. He explained how he had disguised himself as a poor gardener, how he had worked among the people in silence, watching how they treated those who could offer nothing in return. Many had ignored him. Some had mocked him. Others had chased him away. "Only this child," he said, gesturing toward her, "saw a man instead of a burden." The girl stood frozen, her heart racing. The room felt unreal, like a dream she feared would shatter if she moved. She remembered the gardener's quiet questions, his gentle advice, his eyes that seemed to look far beyond her poverty. Now she understood. He had never needed her food. He had needed her truth. The guards lowered their heads. The accusation dissolved into shame. "You are free," the prince said softly to her. "And more than that, you are honored." Tears streamed down her face before she could stop them. She fell to her knees, overwhelmed, her small body shaking as months of fear and hunger finally found release. The prince raised his hand again. "From this day forward, she will be given shelter, education, and protection. Let it be known throughout the kingdom that kindness shown in secret is worth more than gold." A ripple of emotion moved through the hall. Some servants wiped their eyes. Others looked at the girl with regret, realizing how easily they had turned away from her in the past. The prince stepped closer and lowered his voice so only she could hear. "You gave when you had nothing. That is a strength no crown can give." For the first time in her life, the orphan girl felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not fear, not hunger, but safety. Days passed, and her life changed in ways she could never have imagined. She slept on a real bed. She ate without counting every bite. She learned to read and write, her eyes lighting up with every new word. Yet she never forgot the dirt beneath her feet or the ache of an empty stomach. She often returned to the gardens, not as a beggar, but as someone who remembered who she once was. The prince watched her sometimes from a distance, a quiet smile on his face. His test had revealed many truths about his kingdom, but none shone brighter than the lesson carried by a small, brave girl who gave kindness without expectation. And so the story spread from village to village, whispered by those who heard it too late. A reminder etched into the heart of the kingdom, that the smallest act of compassion can change a life. Sometimes, it can change a kingdom. If this story moved you, take a moment to like the video. It truly helps more people discover stories with heart. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this, and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in her place? Your support keeps these stories alive.